Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Best Practices webinar. We are super excited about today. I know I say this every time, but I do mean it. We are super excited about today's webinar. The topic is a really timely one, and we also have just a great panel. So I know I'm a little bit early here, so we're going to wait about a half a minute, make sure everyone gets in, and then I'll introduce our panelists. I'll introduce our CEO, Tony Cevitella, to say a few words. But for now, just hang tight, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds. It is really hard for me to wait 30 seconds. All right, so again, welcome everybody to today's Best Practices webinar. The topic, goals, how to set, keep, and adjust goals. We're going to talk to a group of transportation leaders who are going to share with us how they approach their job and how they approach setting these goals and what they do to make sure that they're hitting their goals and when they need to make adjustments to those goals. There's a lot that goes into planning, as you all know, what goes into planning for a school year and how many drivers you need and buses, and just it's such a complex operation. And so I'm really looking forward to diving deep into this with our panelists. But before we do that, I want to introduce Transfinders President and CEO Antonio Cevitella. Tony, how are you?
Good. Hello, everybody. It's fall. It's a little bit chilly this morning here. You saw me before we were talking. I was wearing a sweater. I had to go outside. You know, it's weird, right? Going outside. How nuts is that? There was frost all over here this morning, so it's a little bit chilly. So now I put back my short sleeve shirts. Yeah, it's fall. It's football season too. I mean, my whole family, they're all Buffalo Bills fans. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, so I know. I've been loyal to them since I first moved to this country. So
America's team.
What's that?
America's team, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously being an immigrant, you want to be as American as possible, and I think it's just my uncle is a big fan. But I love this time of year. You come to my house, there's apple and cinnamon smell all over the house. It's great. But pumpkin spice, what's up with that, Rick? I mean, all of a sudden, like I hear about it everywhere. It's like this biggest thing. I mean, is it on pizza yet? Can you actually order that from Domino's? I mean, maybe, right? I feel like it's everywhere. But listen, I know we're talking about football. It's great. I was a soccer player when I moved to this country. That's just what I did. That's all. I grew up around soccer, and I played forward, which means those are the people that are in the front line making scores. Their goal is to score goals. So when I heard about we're doing goals today, it's like, oh, that brought me back some great memory about how that was part of one of my jobs, right? At a team, we all have our work to do. We all have specific jobs. And on the soccer team, one of my job is score goals. And so goals are very important. And of course, my job at Transfinders, being the CEO and president, I also have to make sure that we set goals. And I obviously have input from all the department heads. And it's important when you want to set goals, it's not just what I want to do. You know, obviously I have aggressive goals, hard, not impossible. I mean, it's okay to do those type of things, but ultimately we have to meet the goals. So I can't wait to hear from the panel from today about how they're tackling this goal setting. And obviously, let's face it, you set some goals, somewhere in there, you got to make some adjustments because not everything's going to go exactly the way you planned. So you better make adjustments because that's how you hit those goals. And by the way, I'm just going to give you one last thing. Speaking about targets, I remember a long time ago, someone told me about raising kids, right? You have all these goals. It's like, listen, it's like this big target that you have way out there. You have a huge target out there. It's a bullseye, and you have like a bow and arrow. And your job is to shoot it and hit it as close as possible, right in that arrow, right in that center. But you know what this gentleman told me? Raising kids is similar to that. You may be a little bit over, maybe a little bit under, it might be a little bit left, a little bit right of it, but you got to make sure you go in that direction. You don't want to go the opposite. So Goals are meant to be specific, but you got to be able to adjust it. Hey, reminder, these webinars are always recorded. You can look at our YouTube channel of Transfinder.com, of course, other places. There's going to be questions. I hope we get a tons of questions. Maybe leave some room for question and answers at the end. But I'm giving it back to you, Rick, Director of Public Relations at Transfinder. And go ahead and let's introduce the panelists and let's have some fun today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tony. You know, you made me think of something as you were talking that I played football. I played soccer briefly my freshman year, but then I thought football, they don't need just 11 players, they need 22. And then they also need special teams. So maybe I had a better shot at getting on the field. But every single play in football, I remember the coach putting the X's and the O's, right, on the board. And every single play is designed to be a touchdown, right? But guess what? We know every play is not going to be a touchdown. So it's what you just said, Tony, about adjustments, that you come back in at halftime even and say, okay, the running plan isn't working here. We're going to, whatever. So every play is designed to be a touchdown, but we know in reality that we need to make adjustments. So that's a really good point, Tony. Super excited about our panel. So as I announce you, if you guys could just pop on screen, Tony, we'll talk to you later on at the end. You want to stay on, you can as well, whatever you guys want to do. Amy Tiedens, please join us. She's from Plymouth, Minnesota, Intermediate District 287. Alisa Roman, and by the way, we're very north heavy today's webinar. So Alisa is from Lewiston Public Schools in Maine. Nick Martini is with Osseo Area Schools in Minnesota. I won't say Minnesota, I won't say that. Marc Medina is with Farmingdale School District in New York. And Mike Martin, the Strategic Advisor, Brand Ambassador at National Association for Public Transportation, also the former Executive Director, who has been in this hot seat for a long time in the past, and it's great to have him back as well. Mike, how are you?
Great, thank you.
So just to get the ball rolling, I'm going to go in the order I just introduced you all. If you could just tell me a little bit about your own role, what you do, tell a little bit about yourself, and also your operation, just so we get a sense of your place. So we'll start with Amy, Alisa, Nick, Marc, and then close it up with Mike. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thanks, Rick. And I do have to say, I'm a huge Vikings fan, so I have to tell Tony we'll have to go after your Bills in the playoffs. We have the same record right now. We have 5-1 and they have 5-1. So anyway, but yes, I'm Amy Tiedens and I'm the transportation manager for Intermediate District 287 in Plymouth, Minnesota. And an intermediate district, we call it that in Minnesota, is we serve 11 member districts that are in the western suburbs of Minneapolis. And what that means is we have many different programs in our district, but our big programs are special ed programs, and we serve kids that have different emotional behavior disorders and physical disabilities as well. But our big programs, we serve students that have emotional behavior disorders or EBD and have autism and then fetal alcohol syndrome. And so my job is to make sure all of our kids are getting to school back and forth safely, but I need to work with our 11 member districts because they're responsible for the to and from transportation. And then I'm responsible but I make sure that I'm sending all the information to all of those districts to make sure that they're able to get our kids back and forth. And then if there's any issues on the bus, I work with them with that as well. And then my main goal is midday transportation. And so we transport many of our students back and forth all day long because many of them go to work sites and vocational programs throughout the metro area.
Very good, thank you. Alisa.
Hello. So my official title is the Director of Nutrition and Transportation for Lewiston Public Schools. And for our transportation side, we have about 5,000 students in the district, and roughly 3,000 of them are on busing each day. Very similar to Amy, we do have our special needs students as well. So we're busing in the state of Maine. We're busing down to southern Maine for some of those schools, almost 45 minutes to an hour away. As well as we're doing our school districts, and then we also have our homeless kids that we're trying to do as well. It's definitely a district that we are in Maine. We have a lot of places that aren't very city-like, but we are a city. We have those one-way streets and lights and traffic patterns and all those crazy stuff. So it's not just a country road. It's definitely more populous with things going on. So there's a lot to consider when you're making your routes and getting those kids to and from where they need to go. So that's a little bit about us.
So Alisa, you're the first one I've ever interviewed. By the way, we just did a profile on Amy and their district, so get that out to you as well. A lot of times this role may have security and transportation, but you're the first with nutrition and transportation. It's an interesting story, but it's great to have you here. Really appreciate you being here.
What's really interesting, just really quick, is that I worked in New York State for a bit at a college, at a university, and then came to Maine. So my skill set isn't just making sweetie Claire's and chicken nuggets for K-12. I have a little bit more on the HR and logistics side, and so it does fit in nice. And definitely when we talk about software and stuff like that, I know on the nutrition side, if you have a cake recipe, you have to be exact or else you're not getting cake. And very much so, you guys have a recipe and we have a recipe for getting our kids safely where they need to be. And if you don't do it, you're gonna mess it up. So there are things that come in common.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. And I just wish you didn't bring up cake because now I'm distracted. I want to go find some cake somewhere. All right. Thanks so much, Alisa. Nick, you're up.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Nick Martini. I'm coordinator of transportation for Osseo area schools. We're a suburb of Minneapolis, about 20 minutes to the north and west. We're a district about 66 square miles. We serve about 22,000 students, of which I transport about 14 to 15,000 of them. We run about 225 vehicles a day. All of our services are contracted, so I have 2 yellow bus contractors and 3 type 3 vehicle contractors. I oversee pretty much anything that goes on day to day, busing, routing, safety, bus paraprofessionals, bus aides, anything that gets kids to and from school, to and from auxiliary sites is kind of under my watch on a daily basis. So a little bit about us. Glad to be here.
Great. So good to have you here. And Marc.
Hi, everybody. Marc Medina, Farmingdale School District down in Nashville County, Long Island in New York. We have about 5,500 students, transport about 3,200 of them. I started out as a school bus driver in 2010, became assistant supervisor in 2016, and supervisor in 2018. So definitely excited to be on this panel with some great transportation professionals across the country. And I always look forward to these because I always take something away, from somebody that just adds to the another tool in the toolbox, so to speak. So I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. Thanks, Marc. I mean, that's one of our goals really is, even if you just get one idea, just one thing you can implement, or a new way of thinking about something. That's what we keep hearing. The reason why we keep doing it, frankly, is because we kept hearing that. It's like I just walk away with at least one nugget, hopefully more than that. Mike, you have multiple experiences here. You both as a transportation director, as well as most recently the executive director at NYAPT, and now you have a new role there as well. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Hope I didn't take it all away from you.
Well, first of all, I'm still having a hard time getting the pumpkin spice pizza out of my head that Tony was talking about before. I mean, maybe on a flatbread, Tony, or I'm not sure on a pizza though. That's almost sacrilege from someone who's from Italy, Tony. I don't know. We can talk about that later.
I don't know if he endorsed it. I don't know if he was endorsing it.
I have a pizza oven at my house, and I have to tell you, I've thrown out a lot of pizzas that did not work out so well, and a lot of I did. I make my own dough, and that took me a long time. Alisa, like you said about the recipe. Sometimes the recipes don't work right, and you have to make adjustments. And I'm not putting pumpkin spice in it. But it just seems like everyone's doing it, right?
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, again, excuse me for being distracted with that, but I'm having a hard time getting that image out of my head. But and one correction to something Rick said too. I've never been a transportation director. There's no way I could do what you folks do on a daily basis. I have the highest respect and regard for your skills and abilities, and there's no way I'm smart enough to handle that. So I did, however, early in my career, drive a school bus. I figured if I was going to talk the talk, I needed to walk the walk. So I went out and drove as a substitute driver for 2 school years when I first started my job. And I got to tell you what, that's a very challenging job, and highest regard and tremendous respect for all of you who do that in addition to your regular jobs here. As Rick mentioned, I am the former executive director of the National Association for Pupil Transportation. You may have seen NYAPT recently hired its new executive director last week. Her name is Molly McGee Hewitt, Dr. Molly McGee Hewitt. She is going to be starting in the middle of November. I hope everyone is excited about that. I'm excited. I think she's going to do great things for the organization and for the industry. And I encourage all of you to reach out to her and to NYAPT when you have an opportunity and learn more about the organization if you're not already a member. My experience, as Rick mentioned, spans about 27 years with NYAPT. And in that time, we worked on a number of different strategic plans that had to be modified, most recently by the pandemic in 2020. So I'm going to bring to you, I think, a kind of a diverse perspective to the conversation today that will not be transportation and or operations based in that regard. So thank you again for inviting me. Pleasure to be here today, and look forward to the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mike. So, yesterday we did a dry run, which we always do, and I threw it out there, just, your first thoughts when you think about goal setting and, some of the things that you wanted to make sure we touched upon. And you all had great things, and I thought about it later, and I'm like, you know what, why don't we just open up with that? It's kind of a free form, and then we'll get into some of the nitty gritty. But again, I'm going to stay with the line here just because we have a pattern here. So I'm going to start with you, Amy, and then go again to Alisa, Nick, Mark, and Mike. Your first thoughts thinking about goal setting and what, key factors are there for you when you're doing that?
Sure. Well, my district does make it a little easier to set goals because we have to set our goals by the end of September every year and submit that to HR, and then that goes to our supervisors. And so we have 3 key elements, kind of a template that we need to follow. So number 1 would be support well-being of employees and students. And for me and my department, race equity and trauma sensitive education is very important to us because many of our students, have had issues in the past or still struggle with race equity issues and having trauma in their lives. So if we're all educated in that, and for me specific, that's making sure that I'm communicating, with the staff, with our contractors, and then training our drivers every year, which I do virtually. And so I do a 3-hour training and try to get all the dispatchers, drivers, everything from all of our member districts and our contractors that we have. And we did a 3-hour training, and I had one of the principals help me with that. And we just help to educate with like what kind of disabilities our students have, what kind of kids they're going to be transporting. And then the last hour and a half, we had like good, uncomfortable conversations about race and race equity. Our second goal is responsive systems of support to support principals, staff in schools. And so that's like routing software, and that was our big thing this year. And we actually just started with Transfinder Plus, and that was a big goal. And yes, yep. And so we just started with that. And so that was a big goal for us. And it's been a lot with training and everything, but that's going to help with our goals, to help have have our routes be more efficient. So we'll continue with that. And then the third thing was our third main goal is support instructional sites works and work on student outcomes. And how we help with that is, again, making sure we're communicating with our principals and making sure that we're helping them with transportation, other transportation needs. And again, making sure we have efficient routes, that we're communicating with the contractors when students are having behaviors increasing or taking away some transportation accommodations, things like that.
I like that structure. I think that's going to be one of the key things we talk about, is just having a structure to know how you're meeting those objectives that you've set out for you and for your district. Before I forget, Tony alluded to this, but I want to reiterate, if you have a thought, you have a question, you have your own statement you want to make about what works for you, I'm constantly monitoring, and so is Bridget, who's working the back end here, the comment section or the question section. So please put things in, and if you have a specific question for Amy or any of the panelists, you can address that as well. Or if you just want to open it up to the panel, I'm constantly watching, and I promise you I will get those up top. So thank you very much. Thanks, Amy. Alisa, goals.
Yeah, as I have Amy go first, and she's got it. I'm like listening to her goals, and I'm like, man, that's good. So we're in a little bit of a different situation, being that we are a contract, or we work with a contract that does our busing, and my department consists of 2 people, me and one other person that does routing. Now the contract handles dispatching. I say that, but there's a radio right beside me. Yeah, I have GPS, all those things. But what's interesting is, in our collaboration with the bus company, there's a lot of things that are potential disconnects. And so sometimes for us, like, I'm listening to Amy's goals, I'm like, that's where I want to be. But the reality is, right now we have some really smaller goals, some like lower ended goals that we're just hoping to get through. And you know, some of them is just, how do we increase that communication with families, but not over communicate? Like, so I don't know if anyone else experiences that, but people get robocalls from schools all the time. We've been dealing with our bus driver shortages in our district. And today, yeah, I have 2 vehicles that are flat out not running, and you're fielding phone calls and things like that. So a lot of my goals are about, how can we make barriers or systems that are really constricting the flow of information? How can we make those more direct? How can we give better access so that an administrator can be part of the process sooner than not? And so I know we are also on the plus side as far as Transfinder Plus. And what's really awesome is, yeah, we started implementing it. We had to make a conscious decision. It was a goal of mine to not be working in Excel sheets or Google Sheets or a map with a Sharpie mark that I found in the basement from the 70s. And so when we look at that, I'm like, we're experiencing growth in our district, which is amazing. So some of my goals, they do change when I get new administrators. We have 7 schools we work with. And so that's the other part of my goal setting, is I'm also looking at who are the people and what are their skill sets that I'm working with, and where are they at in relation to our program. And then sometimes those goals come up out of nowhere. But I know when I sit down to set those goals, one of the things, because I use this on the nutrition side too, is we do measurable goals. So like, what am I going to do? What's the time frame? Is it relevant? And how are we going to get this done? Is it achievable? And then I always say, best laid plans, those goals are going to change because you find something else out. So my whole thing is, what can we do to keep us moving forward? But at least I have that documentation of that potential goal and why we didn't achieve it. But yep, so that's some of how we do our goals. But really, I'm on that other end of the spectrum where we're focusing on just the basic goals of how do we meet the needs of parents and that communication. Our district equally has done a tremendous amount of work in equity, inclusion as well. So we have some antiquated policies that say, everyone in a mile is responsible for, walking to school. And then you look, and that would maybe take the considered more poverty students and force them to walk. And so then when you look at that, are you making that decision based on their color? That could come up very easily. And so you have to be really careful on when you do make goals, there's winners and losers sometimes in our world because we don't have ultimate resources to make it happen. So it does make it challenging. So I notice that anytime I can document why we're doing something, it really assists with the problem.
Very good. Thank you so much. A lot there. Nick, you're up.
So much like the others, you know, goal setting is a big part of what we do kind of throughout the organization from top to bottom. And for me as a leader, you know, I really look at goal setting as it's really a roadmap forward. And that roadmap details two very important pieces in my mind. Number one, it provides direction. Where are we going? What do we need to achieve? What do we need to change? And additionally, it details the supports. It's how are we going to get there? How are we going to accomplish those goals? You know, I think we'll talk about a little bit, I'm sure, about, you know, the importance of redirection and assessment of goals. But, you know, really, I kind of live with that saying, don't look back, you're not going that way. And so I think, you know, we need to be thinking of goals of how do we make people better? How do we make organizations better? You know, like Alisa said, they have to be measurable. They have to be achievable. You know, those are things that are all going to play into this. But really, I think the transition, you know, in my mind, goals, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, before we were really mired deep in driver shortage and staffing shortage, goals were much more, I think, about leadership in the organization and providing that direction. But now they've really become more focused on how do we support that staff to make them feel like they're equipped with the tools that they can buy into the organization and figure that they're going in the right direction and they want to be along for that ride, and it helps us retain them. So I think for us, you know, that is really the biggest thing for us. And I think, you know, second to that, oftentimes as support departments, we kind of get this feeling, or certain people get this feeling, that a lot of, you know, district's mission and strategic plans and stuff are really catered to the classroom. But I think we have to remember that as support groups, we are just as critical in creating, you know, innovational excellence. We are just as important in creating safe and welcoming environments. And so while there are goals that are going to pertain to educational progression, we have to fully understand our role and how do we support that to the best of our abilities.
That's great. Yeah, I got to hear a little bit. The one thing that Alisa touched on, I think you did as well, is a mix of goals too. There's short-term and long-term too. Achievable, maybe something that's more immediate, and then some that are more of the long-range goals as well. Marc, thoughts on goals?
Yeah, goals very, very important. You know, we started off the conversation talking about sports, and you know, I was an athlete coming up, you know, as a young man, and a lot of the attributes that I learned were playing, you know, team sports, and you know, I apply to what I do now, right? It's, you know, I'm a little bit selfish. Like I want to be great. I want my team to be great. I want to win. You know, I look at September as the start of a season, and you know, to prep, you know, to be great during the season, it starts, you know, in the preseason. It starts, you know, before that. It starts in, you know, April, May, and June, when you're working towards next year, right? How do we accomplish that? It's the prep, it's the plan, the communication, the teamwork, and hard work, right? And not wanting to be outworked by anybody. Like I want my team to and myself to just to hustle, and we know what needs to be done and get the job done. There's a lot of things, a lot of obstacles along the way, but we always, as transportation professionals, and I you know, I say it because I see it every year, you know, we find ways to get it done. We find ways to get the job done when it looks like we're not going to be able to. You know, that winning is like a yearly goal, right? There's everyday goals and monthly goals. You know, as far as my everyday, like I want to stay on top of the emails, the phone calls coming in, the parent concerns, the calls and emails from my colleagues, any kind of little wrinkles that come up. I want to take care of it in a timely fashion with a lot of care and a lot of attention. It goes a long way. You know, I work with a contractor also. I think being dialed in, and the phrase that it's not my job. It's something that you'll never hear come out of my department and come out of my mouth, right? The way I look at it is we're all a team, and we all are trying to do the same things, right? We're all, whether you're working for a contractor in a district, we're all trying to get our kids to and from school safely, right? So we all have a common goal. So whether I'm here and when I have my GPS on my flat screen in my office here, and I see something that's not being covered, and for whatever the reason is, I'm not even concerned about what the reason is, but being so dialed into the operation, knowing that I can make a phone call to the dispatcher over there saying, listen, this isn't being covered. This resource, and this resource are centrally located in the district waiting to do something. Let's get that covered. Again, just being so dialed in to the team aspect is an everyday goal. And then, my monthly goals, right? Getting out to bus stops, doing observations, doing my anti-idling checks, things like that. It's just, again, I want to be so dialed in to the operation that it just flows. Everything just kind of flows. And luckily enough, I was brought up in the transportation, taken under the wing by one of the greatest transportation professionals that I was so lucky to learn from, and that's the way he was. So that's the only thing I know, and kind of the way I was brought up, and the way when I played sports, and it all made sense when all of a sudden I started to drive a school bus. It all made sense. So again, I use a lot of that, a lot of those attributes that used to be successful playing athletics, and try to apply it to the operation.
That's great. Well, yesterday when Marc and I spoke, it's not hypothetical. He literally was like, yeah, we have some students that I noticed that this one, Marc, correct me if I'm wrong, but something about a bus, you could tell that this one bus was still had not left the station yet. And that was like, there's just pickups over here. And you're like, hey, I got bus 135, 114, and 22, whatever, can be up there. And, and how can I be a part of it? Not instead of saying, what's wrong with the contractor? It's more, hey, I think that we can minimize the, the impact that these buses won't be coming in too late. And the reason why you said you knew it was because you intentionally do the routing yourself for the most part. So one of Marc's favorite expressions, he uses the word dialed in a lot, and I like it. And the way you're dialed in is that you get your hands dirty. You're doing the routing. So, but that's pretty much what was happening yesterday.
Yeah. And that's, it always gets to the point where it's like a little crazy. Like sometimes I come home and I have to like unplug a little bit, but staring at the GPS and doing the routing, obviously where buses are supposed to be. When it looks full, and when there's an empty spot in it that needs to kind of get covered. But that's
great.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mike, you gave a different perspective on goal setting, which I think added a whole different component. It was a little bit off from the typical work stuff, and I want to make sure you say it. So I'm going to plant that to you, Mike. Don't go off script, because what you said yesterday was really important, and I think people would benefit from. When you think of goal setting, you talked about who you are, and I'm not going to finish your quote, but you tell me.
Well, thank you. And Marc, I find it hard to believe that you need to dial it back when you go home at the end of the day. I mean, that's not 24 hours that we get that. It seems like a 24/7 thing for me, where you're like, dialed in. I love it. The energy's just awesome, terrific. So yeah, from my standpoint, again, whether you're talking about school system, educational service district, whatever, boards of cooperative education, or a not-for-profit organization, right? Successful ones have a vision, a mission, strategic priorities, goals, metrics, and key performance indicators, right? And I emphasize that because on that list, goals is the midpoint, right? Goals are not the starting point, goals are the midpoint, right? So to allude back to something that Nick talked about, right? You have to have kind of a strong grasp of the vision, the mission, and the strategic priorities, because those are not likely to change. Amy mentioned that race equity is something in her school system that they're focused on now. As a strategic priority, I don't know this, I'm going to guess that probably wasn't a strategic priority 5 or 10 years ago, right? That's a new one, but they don't change nearly as frequently as your goals. So when you're thinking about the context of your goals, I think it's also equally important, and they're going, and again, the goals are going to change from year to year, right? I mean, everybody had slightly different goals in 2019 than they had in 2020. And as a result of the pandemic, you also had slightly different goals in 2021 than you had in 2020, right? And goals change, and it's important to focus on them and to try to accomplish them. But, you know, a saying that someone once said to me that always stuck with me, and that is that, you know, your future self is unreliable, and meaning that a lot of people say, hey, look, I'm going to buy this so that I can wear it when I do this. You know, I'm going to buy this pair of pants so that they'll fit me after I lose weight, or I'm going to buy whatever, this other thing after I do something else. And that doesn't always happen, right? Goals change, and they change for various reasons. But one of the things, in my view at least, that should never change is your realization that your personal goals, right, are something that is almost intrinsic, right? Who you are as a person and the goals that you have as a human and as a professional are things that are going to I think, be steadfast regardless of what your organizational goals are. And I think it's important to understand that, right? And by that I mean, especially as we learn from the pandemic, issues of self-care, mental health, you know, the focus on making sure that the people you work with feel secure and understand the role that they have in a larger context, I think, are things that are really important. And to that regard, I would emphasize to all of you, whether you're you know, on the panel or elsewhere, the importance of things like professional growth, continuing education, all of those kinds of things that are really important for you as individuals. And those will also benefit your organization and your coworkers as well. So yeah, my perspective on that when we started to have the conversation was a little bit different, I think, maybe than everybody else's. But I would encourage all of you to think about that. And you know, the traditional way that people think about things like this is, you know, you verbalize it, you think about it, you write it down, you verbalize it to others. You know, and then you make sure that people are focused on it. Just one thing that, if I give you nothing else today, one of the ways that I always tried to remember and stay focused on goals that I had of my own, whether they're organizational or individual, was use them as your password when you're accessing systems. And I don't mean just write down your goal as like, you know, it's, you know, whatever, one word. But here's an example, right? If one of your personal goals is, I will walk every day in 2023, right? I will walk every day in 2023 for mental health, for physical health, for other things, right? Your password could be, I will walk every ED day 2023 exclamation point, right? That way, every day you log into your computer, you think of that personal goal, because you have to say it when you log in every single day.
Did you come up with that idea?
It's top of mind for you.
Did you come up with that idea?
No, I did not come up with that. I'm not that. I told you already, I'm not that smart, Rick.
Oh, you always say that, and it's not true. That is a great idea.
That's something a great idea. So if I give you nothing else, that's it. And I say that because I mentioned to Rick previously, I'm so sorry. I have a hard stop at 12:15 today. I've got an appointment that I just have to be at for one of my personal goals, which is to walk again. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to sign out at 12:15. But
not a problem. Not a problem. Thank you so much.
Something small for all I've got. And I'll stay on for a few more minutes if I can do anything else for you. Be my guest, but please don't be offended when I sign off.
Not at all. Not at all.
Rick, I actually just to piggyback off of what Mike just said, that professional development part is another part of what keeps, you know, for me, my mind kind of in the game, right? Staying involved locally in my local chapter and making connections and staying involved on the state level and getting involved in committees and serving on that executive committee, like developing those relationships and the networking and the ideas that come out of that is something, it's almost priceless. I mean, it's really, really, and I'm sure every state has an association I would imagine I would highly encourage that also. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
That's great. That's great. We have 2 quick polls, and then we'll come right back. I'm going to ask you guys questions while the polls pop on screen. I want to we have a jumping off point. I wanted to kind of get a sense, just using this as a question for all the panelists, and I'm just going to ask anybody who wants to jump in on this. Just tell me who it is that's speaking, so I know. How far ahead do you plan specifically for your transportation department? We're talking about goals and plans. How far ahead? So I'm actually gonna just pick somebody, because Nick, you said something yesterday. So tell me a little bit about how you plan. 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 to 3. You have your own number. What's your process?
Yeah, so we typically have a 3-year plan that's always, we'll say, rolling. That 3-year plan kind of looks at what are we working on now, what's coming up in the next year, and what are we looking at maybe a little bit farther down the road. And so that plan is adjusted, well, really throughout the year as things come up and needs come up and are developed. But it really helps us to timeline projects, especially bigger projects. Like I'll use, for example, our 2 big things we've got going on in our plans right now are our migration to Route Finder Plus. You know, with a big operation, there's a lot that goes into that planning, involving our technology team, training for staff, training for our vendors. And so that stuff, we really need to have that on our radar sometime ahead of the actual implementation, so that we can schedule things and make sure we hit our marks. Additionally, you know, being a contracted district, we have pretty comprehensive high value contracts with our yellow bus vendors and our type 3 vendors. And we have to be looking ahead before those requests for quotes go out and are publicized, because we need to know what's going on in the industry. We need to look ahead at what technology is coming down the road to make sure that we have considerations in our contracts for that. So for us, 2 to 3 years, I would say, is a pretty in-depth planning. You know, we're always planning short-term things as acute issues come up. And we're also, because of finance, looking farther down the road, 5, 10 years with a much higher level lens. But 2 to 3 years for us is kind of our core detail planning. That's good. That's great. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Sure, I'll just say too, along like what Nick said, I always try to plan, you know, at least 2 years ahead of time. And when you do have to plan to go out, you know, I do a request for quotation, and we have it where it's a 2-year agreement, but then we can extend it 2 years. And so, you know, we just extended it this year. So it's something I'm always thinking ahead. Okay, we have to start preparing ahead of time when we're doing things like that. Or, you know, the different goals. So like when we implemented new transportation routing software, that's something I had to think about, plan, budget for, things like that. So, but you can always make changes along the way if you need to, but it's good to always have those goals and plan ahead. And I agree with Marc said as well. As I'm a board member of our state NYAPT association, and I've learned so much being a part of that for the years, and going, you know, as far as having my career goals as well, going to national conferences, going to the state conferences, and just being able to network and just learn every day.
That's great. Yeah, you know, Tony, our boss, Tony Cevitella, you know, has had a number of emails and other, you know, communications with our team to look at our company as, you know, how, as a career path. So how do you progress in your career? There's so many ways to get promoted, to add to your skill set and various certifications and those kind of things. So you do feel like you're being invested in, and that you feel like you're progressing, because nobody really I don't think most people really want to stay still. Bridget, can you give us the results to that poll?
Okay. Yes, so how looks like people polled in, 29% are 3 months ahead trying to plan, 35% at 1 year, 24% at 2 to 3 years, and 12% for 6 months.
Very good. Now, can you bring up the next poll? We have another one about revising, and I'm gonna So we had Amy and Mark just to address this one. So I'm going to ask Alisa, Nick, and Mike. I'm going to ask Mike first because you might have to run. So Mike, when you have a plan or goals, how often are you reviewing those? Weekly, monthly, quarterly, daily? We don't have daily on there, but yearly. Tell me a little bit about your approach when you're reviewing your goals. Starting with you, Mike. If you haven't left. Oh, maybe Mike left already. All right, we'll go to Nick.
Yeah, so for us, I think really all of the above. You know, on some level, I think we discuss things in weekly staff meetings to kind of keep us on track and figure out, you know, are things that we had figured as constants changing. But more deeply, I would say quarterly and definitely yearly, there's an evaluation to make sure. You know, I think all pieces are essential to keep you on track and keep you progressing.
Very good. How about you, Mark?
Well, I would agree with what Nick just said. I think it depends on the goal and the plan. I think, you know, depending on what the goal and the plan is, it could be daily, you know, weekly, monthly, yearly, right? One thing that I know you've heard me say before, Rick, and I'm going to echo it again because I really have this quote is like the forefront of my head is it was from Bruce Lee, and it's like he says, "Be water, be like water. You got to be adaptable. You got to be able to fit into any little space and be productive." And so, "Be water" is the quote that I would say here.
I like that. I think the Wonder Twins said that too. The form of what? And then how about you, Alisa? And then you can bring up the results, Bridget. How about you, Alisa? How often are you reviewing your goals?
Yeah, no, I think for us, it like kind of piggybacking a little bit on the previous poll too. Some of our goals, I have to say, like I'm always trying to pay attention to what new programs or things are happening in the district and try and be proactive based on those, like what I see coming down the pipeline. So some of that, for me, we're about to hit it as we hit into November, December, that's budget season. And so I would say some of my goals have started well before budget season. So that way, when I'm sitting there saying how much money I need for what I'm going to do, I have a rough draft, something I can present to a committee and give them this bigger overview of what we were aiming for. And sometimes that is a 2 to 3 year part, but like, how are we going to progress there? And for me, that check-in, because we're such a small team, that check-in isn't as a formalized process. Like if I had a much larger team, yeah, you have that weekly meeting and you have that monthly meeting and you go back and look. But the reality is, for me, with a smaller one, it's looking through and being like, oh, did we make this better? Did we move on? And when you're a small team like I am, it's soliciting feedback from the people that are interacting with you. How can I make it better for you? How can I adjust my goal to make it so we're both successful? That's a hard one to do because you have to sometimes give a little. But what I've learned out of that is if you can get that buy-in, you won't be an island by yourself. So for my goals, yes, we're looking at them before we're doing that budget process. But then if you really look, we're kind of diving in throughout the year to go back around. And those smaller goals might just be like a school or a program, or they're going to start some after school, whatever. And you have to miraculously come up with a driver and a bus. So those are the things that those goals change. And I learn from each person that does things. I'm like, oh, next year we're not doing this way. We're not doing this again. So learning when to assert yourself is definitely part of that goal process to help along too.
I like the buy-in piece of it too. I think when people feel like they're part of, instead of having it plopped in their lap, sometimes it is, you're a leader. And so you are setting the goal, but other times if it can feel like a little bit like I had a part of this creation of this goal. You're shaking your head.
Yeah, and like getting soliciting that feedback from all levels of the organization is super important. And you don't always want to hear the bad stuff, but I look at it and I'm like, that helps us get stronger. There's always going to be an outlier. There's always going to be someone that thinks your goal's crap, that you're going to have to like be like, listen, like we all have goals. Don't rain on my parade. Yeah,
good.
so I mean that buy-in is definitely huge, and then it helps, pays off in dividends down the line, because I can't be in all those places. I can't see that daily interaction. So if you have people believe that they really are invested in those goals and in that process, they're going to represent better when they're doing that day-to-day task that seems so monotonous, but they represent better because they feel part of that process.
That's great. Amy, thoughts on that?
Yes, I agree. I mean, we have that in my department, or not just my department, but my larger department is business services, and my supervisors has bi-monthly meetings with us. We have, facilities, food service, myself and in transportation, and then finance. And we go to the different schools and we meet with the principals and assistant principals just face to face, and just want to, see how everything's going and what we can do, to help support them. So that really helps. And then for myself, I try to make sure, like what Marc was saying, is I try to drop in at busing time in the morning or afternoon at the different schools, and I have my vest on and I'll just go out there and help direct traffic if I have to. I agree that there's nothing I won't, if my staff needs help with it, I will jump in and help. So I would never say that's not my job. And I think it goes from the top bottom, so if you're willing to help and be part of a team, then everyone's going to be, excited about that. And I have a small team like Alisa does. It's just myself and my transportation support person. And we talk on a daily basis about things that we need to improve. And I think that's important to always work for that.
That's great. Bridget, did we get the results on that last poll? I just realized I don't think I asked you to pull that up. Okay, give us those results.
Yep. So 40% were monthly reviewing goals, 20% weekly, 27% quarterly, and 13% yearly.
Very good. Thank you so much. And if you could go to the next slide, I just put together some interesting facts about goals, and then we'll get back to a couple other questions I have here. Study by the American Society for Training and Development found that the probability of completing a goal increased 25% if you consciously decide to work toward that goal. I know it sounds like a really kind of a dumb statistic, but I thought it was interesting because maybe kind of going to what Mike said, I'm consciously going to walk every day. And so how often can I put a goal on the side and I think about it later, but it's not front and center. So I just thought that was an interesting number. 65%, also from the same group, said the chance of reaching a goal it's increased if you have an accountability partner. Now, this could be a personal goal, but I think accountability can also be just a colleague, a boss, that could hold you accountable. That number increases to 95% if you set regular meetings. So you have a ongoing appointment with that person, because then you gotta have that person say, well, did you do this? No, I didn't get to that yet. So that's kind of forces you to, to make sure you're checking off those things on your list. And then lastly, and I think we all talked about this yesterday as well, and I know it just came up again today, I think setting a deadline, right? Is it important to have a deadline or else nothing gets done? I used to be a reporter for almost 30 years, and deadlines were a natural part of my life not just every day, but when I worked with the Associated Press, it was every hour practically. So thank you, Bridget. You can go on to back to the panel slide there, which is just progress it. And then, so tell me, are there some, we touched upon this, I know a little bit, but give me a sense of like, are there typical goals? And I'm just gonna open this up to anybody, is there safety goals? Are there on time goals? What's a typical goal in a transportation operation that you set and then, measure?
I can jump in, I guess. So for us, I think we take a little bit different approach at Osseo. We always have safety goals, and we always have goals about performance, top-level customer service. But our formal goal setting process is usually something serves in two fronts. Number one, usually we have a goal that is a department-wide goal that really strives as continuous improvement move the department forward. So a couple things we've done in past years is, this year, as I said, our migration to Route Finder Plus, that's going to help our operational efficiency and move us to, kind of that next level, being able to access our system easily, use those additional tools to help combat driver shortage. Last year, one of our big goals was to make sure that all of our forms available on our website and the ways that we are reaching people, everything was translated into our 5 primary languages that we serve. And, in our district, we serve hundreds of different languages, but we have 5 primaries that make up the bulk of our student body. And so we wanted to be able to meet people where they are at and have that accessibility. So that was a goal. The second part of our goal setting is always a goal that is on a personal level that helps the employee, but also helps the organization. So some of those goals, we've done everything from, Microsoft Excel classes to presentation classes to my personal goal last year. I finished all my prerequisite coursework to sit for the NYAPT certified director exam. We want something that benefits the employee, shows our investment in them, but also is a benefit to the organization as well. And so those are kind of the 2 fronts for us that are considered, I guess, our typical goals.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. Those are great points there. Anybody else?
Yeah, I guess I'll just go off of that again, just always having goals and to make sure, and I think staff development is a very important goal. So Gina, who works with me, she was very excited when, I offered her to go to our state transportation conference this year, and she just really enjoyed it. It was her first year working in transportation. So, that's the thing. Sometimes it's really hard to have either yourself or your staff to go to classes or sessions or conferences because you're so busy in your daily tasks, but you need to make sure that you do take time for that. For me this year, I took a car seat class through the National Child Passenger Safety Certification. So I'm a car seat tech now, and that now is kind of like my new passion. And now I know, it used to be I would sometimes get calls, emails from staff saying, okay, there was kids being transported in a van and they possibly should have been in a booster seat and they're not. And so I just one day just went out to the school and saw that and started asking, where's your booster seats? And they pulled them out of their back of the van. So that's, again, a big, sometimes it can be a disconnect people just don't realize. So in our district now, when we're sending out requests, we're making sure that it says, this child is, 6 years old and they need a booster seat. But sometimes if you don't know things, you don't know it. So again, just trying to always, learn.
Yeah, Rick, and I think that highlights kind of when you look down the road to see what your needs are and changing needs. We all know that due to bus driver shortage, many of us have seen an explosion of type 3 vehicle use. And while we've always had them in our system, it has really come to the forefront about the child safety seats just because they're so prevalent now. So, that's a great way of looking at the current environment and adapting goals to suit the needs based on current environment.
I like that last sentence you said. Say it again. Adapting your needs to suit the existing environment.
Yeah, wow. That's as transportation. We've got it.
That's like rich. That's gold right there. Listen, I told you it was going to go by fast, and it really did. I'm already got about 3 minutes left. We always try to end these on time as best we can. I want to do a like takeaways, closing takeaways. Bridget, can you advance the slide real quick? Well, I guess I can get to this point in a minute. So if you guys could give me your takeaways, I'm going to start with Marc because Marc got to wait a lot of times and have time to think. I'm going to make you go first, Marc, because I know you think on your feet. Just a takeaway can be just what, maybe somebody who's listening, and I want to thank all the attendees, that they might either bring back to their office or they might want to bring to their superintendent or their school board or something that just personally they want to make part of their life. So what's one thing that you would want someone to take away from today's discussion? I'll start with Marc. I'll go the other way. Nick, Alisa, and Amy, and then I'll close this out.
I would start. I'm going to end off with what I started off in the beginning. Obviously goals are important. Multitude of goals, short term, midterm, long term. Don't be afraid to like shoot for greatness. Don't be afraid to like shoot for the impossible. And maybe if you fall short, if you fall short of greatness and you're like, very good or excellent, that's a good thing. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to be great.
That's awesome. Don't be afraid to be great. That's awesome. Nick.
Yeah, I would say, goals are critical, but don't reinvent the wheel. Look to your colleagues, look to the industry to see the things you need to be addressing. One of the things we didn't talk about a lot, but, to help us project plan goals, we use a product available online called Asana, ASANA. It's a free software it's a project management tool. It allows us to keep track of critical tasks, create benchmarks to see, are we on track? Are we headed in the right direction? That way we don't have to remember it. I think using the tools that are out there commercially that are at your disposal, use everything you can so that you can put your effort into the goal instead of trying to remind yourself the pieces, the timelines, where you need to be. Let people who've already worked on that do that for you.
That's awesome. Very practical, Nick. Very practical. That's great. Alisa.
I had to switch my headphones. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good. My other ones were beeping at me. I would just like to say, if there's big districts, small districts, like your goal does not have to be something that is somebody else's. Make it your own. Definitely take it and tweak it to your environment. You can definitely strive for that greatness and being awesome with your own individual goal. And it will help your team better if they feel that connection because it's individualized a little bit.
I like that. Make the goals your own. That is very good. And Amy.
Yes, goals can be overwhelming. And sometimes some of us get so excited and we want to make so many changes. But I've learned through the years is to have maybe one, big goal and then maybe have a couple smaller ones. And it's so much easier to have that, to have it more obtainable. And sometimes maybe it might take like we said, 2 years, 3 years to obtain the whole goal. But if you can start progressing and then again, using your resources, using people around you, if you just try to do it yourself, that sometimes can be, very overwhelming, but it's just you just get excited when you do reach your goals. So just keep going.
In the startup world, they kind of use this expression called BHAG. I don't know if you've heard of this, the big, hairy, audacious goal. I don't know why it has to be hairy, but that's the expression, BHAG. So go for that big goal. I like that. And Tony, take away.
Great things. Thank you to everybody. Love the dialed in there. That's awesome. Love that. I'll talk about January 1st. For us, January 1st is a brand new year. That's so awesome about those things. You set new goals. Obviously, all of you have different various startup. That's when you really do those. I always say they're difficult goals, but they're not impossible. And I just want to tell you a little bit about development, how we develop software. We are using an agile method, which lets you do 2 weeks. They're called sprints. So you define exactly what's going to happen in 2 weeks. Obviously, as many of the 2 weeks possible is better. But what happens is that every 2 weeks, what's going to happen in 2 weeks from now. And what happens is that you celebrate those victories. If you say it's going to be a 6 months goal, it's cool, but break it down to 2 weeks at a time. And we have a stand up, which means every morning we stand up like, where are our goals? How are they? Or is there anything that's impeding to reach our goals? So those are things that don't just set a goal and think it's just going to happen. It means work. I recommend every single day you have a 3-minute stand up. Stand up with the leader saying, all right, what's in your way? Because as a leader, I got to get rid of things that's in your way to reach those goals. So don't forget that part, because we forget that there's things could be impeding, for us to be successful. So great takeaways from all of you. Thank you, of course, always.
That's great. Those are good. It's like short, little milestones along the way, so you can kind of get. We all need those kind of pats on the back.
Feel like they did something, right, Rick? They feel like, all right, I'm chipping away at this massive, difficult goal.
Like how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. I've never had an elephant, but that's what they say. Okay, if you have a story, we are always looking for stories. We're also always looking for panelists. I'm going to get to that in a second. But if you have a story, I will contact you, I promise. Go to mystory@transfinder.com, send an email to that address and say, I have a story. And I'd love to reach out to you because these are best practices. So we're looking for any district that's doing something unique or just something that's worked for them that we can share. That's why we put this amazing panel together today, because I hope you all glean something from their experiences and their insights and their tips. Okay, Bridget, if you can go to the next slide. We have going to close out the year strong with these next two webinars. So Thursday, November 17th, Trends in Transportation, and then Thursday, December 15th, closing the year strong. So if you're interested in being a panelist, please drop me a note and we'll get you scheduled, and then we'll start working on January. But we got a couple strong ones coming up before the year is over. So again, I want to thank our panelists so much. Your insights, just a camaraderie. I'm just always impressed with the work you do and your dedication to your craft, and it is a craft. And I want to just thank everybody for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Until next month, see ya.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.